And welcome back, everyone, to yet another edition of Going for Two, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host, Matt Brown. I'm the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter and throughout the D1 Ticker family of publications. I'm joined by my colleague, Bryan Fischer. Bryan, today is a special episode.
It's not just another episode, as you mentioned there. It's number 100. We have hit triple digits. We are, as I mentioned last week, in syndication now. If anybody would want to pick up the rights to this here podcast, but excited to hit this milestone with you and to many more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's 100's cool and true. I think Extra Points fashion. Bryan and I, we talked about this a couple of days ago. We're like, we should try to bring in a special guest. We should do something a little bit more introspective. But here's the thing. A bunch of stuff's going on right now. And Bryan is trying to edit, I believe, roughly 77 videos from NACDA and still kind of get that out. I'm tracking 6 different stories at the same time. And we didn't book a special guest. And we figured you, given everything that's happening in college athletics right now, don't want to dedicate any more of your time to us sniffing our own farts. We'll have time to get nostalgic and introspective once we've done more on this show. We'll just acknowledge it, hitting it out. 100's pretty cool. Hope there's some more to come.
To be fair, yeah. we do have several guests booked for the next 6 weeks or so. We are scheduled out a little bit. We just didn't necessarily just get everything caught up for episode 100. But listen, beyond 101 and beyond, we got you covered.
There are a couple of big things that I want to make sure that we talk about. Both just a couple of stories that we're working on and other important news stories that deserve some special attention. There is one in particular that could not be a more Extra Points kind of story. And it's something that if you don't live where I live, you might have missed it. Bryan, I'm sure you know about this. The Big Ten is buying Fogo. This is a big deal. Have you been to that Fogo by chance?
I have not actually eaten at that one, but it's funny because you joked in particular, the Big Ten is adding Brazil. I mean, this is right up your alley, right?
This is the most Matt Brown story that possibly can be. So we've joked about this before, but in case you're unaware, Big Ten headquarters is in Rosemont, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago. It's very close to the city. It's very close to O'Hare Airport. It's basically one gigantic fancy mall. There's like a casino and like an indoor skydiving place and outlet mall and that kind of thing. But you can get to the headquarters very easily from the airport. When you pull into the Big Ten parking lot, and it's a nice, handsome, pretty new building. There's a museum on the first floor. It's not extravagant like the Pac-12, but it's a nice building. It literally shares the parking lot. They are conjoined at the hip with a Brazilian steakhouse, which is funny because, listen, until like a couple of weeks ago, this was still historically and culturally a cornfield conference. I am one of the only Brazilians that's from Ohio, Columbus. There's not even that many here in Chicago. The Big Ten booster Brazilian people, they're all my cousins. Right? So it's funny to kind of come in there because what? You think of like Rotel and you think of corn-related products and you think of bratwurst. You don't think of feijoada and meat on swords, but it's right there. However, according to our friends here at Crane's Chicago Business, I guess the city of Rosemont is technically the owner of the Fogo side of the building. They have sold it to the Big Ten for, I believe, $7.3 million, which, I mean, I guess that's a lot of money. It's a pretty big restaurant. I guess it's pretty important real estate, but it's not like the Big Ten's hurting for cash right now.
No, certainly not with those media rights negotiations ongoing, continuing this week, as a matter of fact. So they'll have plenty of leftover pocket change to pay for that $7 million. I'm sure the schools probably would have liked another $500,000 in their conference distributions. But hey, office space is it's not necessarily at a premium right now, given the entire world and everything that has been happening. But controlling your own destiny in terms of that own building, I'm sure there's business sense for why it makes sense for the Big Ten to actually do this. It was funny. I was actually joking with somebody that is in the Big Ten office. Does this mean we get to eat at Fogo de Chao for free now?
I was about to say, surely they get some kind of discount if they start catering staff meetings, and that's definitely worth it.
You got to think there's got to be some sort of arrangement, but apparently I was not the only one to ask that in light of the story. So, it'll be interesting. I think this is, another business item line in there for the Big Ten conference office. But, it's interesting because, I joked on Twitter upon seeing the news that the Pac-12 is getting out of the office space game. They're getting out of San Francisco. The Big 12 there is a very, very nondescript kind of conference office-y space. The SEC is nothing really to write home about. Really, these conference office meetings are just for meeting space. It's really just a conference room. That's all you kind of need. And, it's a big move by the Big Ten that I'm sure that they will have some sort of plans for this, but I would imagine at least in the near term that Fogo De Chao is going to stay there and stay quite at least a part of the jokes about the Big Ten office.
Yeah, as of Tuesday evening on the 12th, I did send a note around here because I'm also a degenerate. As far as we know, Fogo's not closing. If we get some news, either Bryan or I, about whether there are fringe Brazilian cuisine benefits now afforded to Big Ten staffers, I promise you we will address it on Going for Two or Extra Points, because that is what you pay us for. That's what home field pays us for.
There's the Tejas de Brazil, like down the street from the SEC office. So maybe that's
is there really?
They're going to go after that franchise next, or whatever it might be. We might see a restaurateur war expanding into, and instead of the college football playoff expansion come 2025, 2026,
Brazilian steakhouse.
It's all about Brazilian steakhouses.
Listen, if we're going to get into this business, my humble plea would just be, someone needs to buy office space or lease or include in their headquarters a cheaper option. Fogo's wonderful. Texas de Brazil is wonderful. All these steakhouses are wonderful. I love eating a copious amounts of meat off source as much as the next guy. But sometimes you just want pastéis. Sometimes you just want some pouch of queijo. Sometimes you want something that's not going to be $65. And there aren't a lot of those places in Chicago. I'm telling you, the stuff is good. If you're in the external relations department, the business department, real estate, or everything here, I'm at matt@extrapointsmb.com. Trust me, the guy named Matt Brown does know a little bit about Brazilian food. And listen, the Big Ten's a volleyball conference. Brazil is definitely a volleyball country. The Big Ten cares about women's soccer. Brazil is starting to care about women's soccer. It's a good fit. Clearly, a premium on sunshine is critical now for other expansion opportunities. Brazil has that in spades. Just the whole conference, the whole country. What
kind of restaurant would you put in there? You're taking over as the Big Ten landlord now, and you're kicking Fogo out, maybe, and not given your Brazilian ties, probably not. But what would be the most Big Ten restaurant to actually have next to the Big Ten office?
This is very easy. If you're going to put something in that's actually Big Ten is all hell, you put in a Culver's.
That's exactly
right. You put in a double-decker Culver's. I don't even know what the bougie version of that would be. I'm sure there's some place that sells artisanal cheese curds. I am not the person to talk about what kind of beer you would need other than lots to really kind of fit into there. But I'm not a guy. Fogo is one of the few restaurants where I've been in the last 4 months, honestly, that doesn't serve chicken tenders or like grilled cheese. I'm not the guy to be giving nightlife advice or anything right now, because I'm just like, Applebee's, man. I'm not going to take my kids to Fogo.
Well, given recent expansion, maybe this is where the first In-N-Out in the Chicagoland area is going to go. Maybe that's the plan here, because that could definitely get that $7 million back pretty quickly if you open an In-N-Out by the Big Ten office there.
That would make me change my thinking about this move significantly. One of the reasons, of course, that the Big Ten has enough money to start buying up, to pivoting to restaurant real estate and making a bunch of dumb jokes for sports writers, is because this league is about to become even wealthier. Bryan and I, we had done some actual reporting a couple of weeks ago. It feels like much longer than that, about what was happening with these media rights negotiations and what the Big Ten is doing here. Our friends at Sports Business Journal published a recent update just a couple of days ago. I don't know if this is something that is going to be done by media days, which I think was the hope. Maybe that's probably too ambitious of a timeline, but we're looking at $1.3 billion combined for this whole deal. People are going to be, the schools are going to make just a ton of money, huh?
Oh, absolutely. I think There was obviously right when it happened, you heard the report out of SBJ that Apple is back in the negotiations. I'm not quite sure that's the case necessarily, but look, this is not just in terms of the Big Ten rights increasing, grabbing USC and UCLA, but you're also taking away from the Pac-12, really, taking away huge market out west. So it's almost like you're damaging one of your competitors that is coming to market after you, and it drives up the premium for your own rights. Look, when you're seeing UCLA play Michigan State and USC and Ohio State and USC Michigan happen more often, that's just going to be more attractive games. There's going to be better inventory to sell and more inventory to sell as a result of this move. So. If you're the Big Ten, because of the way the rights timing, I mean, it really is kind of a perfect storm for them to not only have increased bids coming around this week, but increased interest if you're ESPN, which has always been in the mix for one of those Big Ten packages. Yeah. Now they might say, you know what, it's totally worth it to pay another $150 million a year, knowing that we can get a second tier Ohio State game or a USC game occasionally, because I think the conference would like that relationship eventually to still happen with ESPN. I know a lot of ADs are hesitant necessarily to sign up for a package where they're not on ESPN or ABC to get that exposure, because they know just kind of the college football media ecosystem being left out of being on a game day, so often. That
nobody gets fired doing a deal with ESPN, whether you're the Big Ten or the Big Sky. There's something to that. It's I didn't even interrupt you, but it is it's funny. I think that the conventional wisdom 2.5 weeks ago would have been, well, these additions make it even more likely that ESPN would not be a part of it, because now you're seeing this consolidation and solidification of a Fox conference and an ESPN conference. And if you want, Fox wants to really solidify themselves as the bipolar opposite of the power struggle here with ESPN. Why would you share the cream of the crop with your new expansion, even if you're giving them tier 2 or tier 3 games with ESPN, right? It's not like there are a lack of other potential partners. I had been hearing that CBS had really pushed very hard to be a part of this, as well as Amazon. But based on the SBJ report and based on some of the other whisperings I've heard too, like I would not count ESPN out of this at all, which I don't know enough if that would be bad news for the Pac-12 or the Big 12 necessarily, but it would probably be a little bit surprising given how it would be pretty easy to kind of draw this narrative, and probably one that I've been guilty of this is the United States and Soviet Union. They're not going to be working together.
And keep in mind, look, Fox has the majority of the Big Ten, right? So they're going to get your Ohio State Michigan game every year. Like that necessarily is not exactly changing. There's probably going to be 3 packages coming out of this. There's the Fox packages that's kind of cemented, and there's probably 2 more that are likely to emerge out of this. They've kind of taken a couple bids out of this. So you can have that CBS game of the week go to a Big Ten team and have an ESPN or an NBC as a partner as well. And I think that is going to be part of the driving kind of factor in terms of these rights negotiations, is not only who are those other partners, but I think the Big Ten would like additional partners, not just Fox and ESPN. I think they would like to bring in an Amazon, a CBS, and an NBC, really to complement kind of their existing structure, and not only get that additional media exposure from some of those other companies. That means not only are you having a game televised, likely over broadcast television to a lot of people in those major audiences, but you're having NBC Sports and CBSSports.com, and you're having tailgating focus on that game of the week. So there's like the ancillary benefits of having multiple media partners. The Big Ten has certainly realized that, and I think that is going to be a part of these negotiations beyond just that kind of Fox package. But the bottom line is, in adding USC and UCLA to the mix, it has not only increased the value significantly when this rights package actually kind of goes into effect in 2024, but really it's all about hurting a competitor as well. And so I think you got to kind of keep that in mind, that the TV companies, they understand what the Pac-12 lost in particular, and that makes even more of a premium. Even though it's just 2 teams out of LA, it's a big deal for them.
It's not just 2 teams at LA. It's 2 teams. The flagship program of this league, at least on the football side and the basketball side, and the flagship market. And the disproportionate weight that Southern California had for the TV inventory in that league is hard to overstate. This is the second biggest television market in the country. I know that markets don't matter quite exactly the same way what they did a decade ago, but there really aren't that many other big cities that really care about football in this footprint. I mean, yes, the Bay Area is like the number 6 market. That's not a good college football market. The level of penetration that you can get whether that's from Cal or Stanford. There's 8 Stanford fans. Like that's clearly not one of the things there. Yeah.
I go back to when the national title game was in the Bay Area there. I mean, it was almost just like another weekend there in San Jose, and it just felt weird, to have such a massive game between, Alabama and Clemson. There was a whole lot of hype, in the college football ecosystem for the game, but you walk around town and there was just not really the buzz, you normally associate with the national title game in other places, whether it was New Orleans, whether it's, in Indianapolis last year. I mean, there's some really palpable, you kind of on the street feel of hey, there's a big game in town this week, and there was not any of that. I think in the Bay Area, it's nice that a game like that does go out to the West Coast. But you're right. The market itself, I would say, certainly heavily tilted towards the NFL and baseball, and then way down in the pecking order is Stanford and Cal. And not to disparage any of those fans out there, it's just like it can be difficult to get to those games, and those are smaller fan base. I mean, Stanford's a smaller private school. They just do not have the kind of largesse fan base that a Wisconsin might have, or even a UCLA, which is a much bigger school. So
a huge school. So, and on that note, one of the questions that I've been asked, basically every time I do a sports radio hit, I've had my readers ask this question. It's every third Twitter question right now. It's like, okay, I understand now that the gigantic chunk of the Pac-12's TV valuation just walked out the door. And the Big 12 or Big 12 leadership is making it known via other news stories that they're being very aggressive and they want to take some of these teams. So why hasn't anything happened yet? No other team a Power 5 team has changed conferences, nor to the best of any of our knowledge is anybody especially close to changing a conference right now. What I would want to convey for anybody if you're a Colorado fan or a Utah fan and you're feeling very nervous, or if you're a Washington fan and you're feeling very nervous, or a Big 12 fan who, after the world kind of left you for dead last summer, now kind of like the idea of feeling that you have a little bit more power and you want to go kneecap somebody. What I can tell you from what I have been hearing from the last week and a half or so is that it's not a surprise you're not hearing nothing big's happening. And quite frankly, it would be a surprise if something big happened in the next month, if not a little bit longer. A big part of that, forgive me if I dug into this on the last show, is people need time to digest the data. And what we saw very quickly after USC and UCLA left, Pac-12 says, okay, we're gonna get into our formal negotiating period here. I think ESPN has the first crack at the media rights. We want to get some valuation deals. We want to look at a potential partnership with the ACC. Those ADs and those presidents need to know the TV numbers. Folks in the Big 12 need to know the potential TV numbers as they go to market in a little bit, and not just one set of numbers, but 5 or 6 potential scenarios or variations. Nobody's going to make a decision until they've had a chance to really get in the weeds with that data, get it vetted by their attorneys, get it vetted by outside consultants, and then have the next step. That is literally not something that gets turned around in 6 hours or 6 days. And so, especially given that people are out of town or kind of just getting back into the office and everything, that my best reporting would be that's where we are right now. And there's not a gigantic outside push to do something tomorrow when that data is going to be the exact same data August 15th. That drives what you've been hearing too.
Yeah, I think there's kind of three parallel tracks here that are obviously slowly progressing. You obviously have the Big 12 and what they want to do, and I think to be fair, Brett Yormark, the new commissioner taking over, not even officially right now, wants to be aggressive. That's just kind of in his nature. Have there been conversations between various schools? Sure, there's kind of a filling out period, but look. Fox and ESPN are kind of in that exclusive negotiating window for the Pac-12, and they're kind of going through that rights, figuring out what this is going to mean for them, really getting some of those hard numbers from the TV networks in terms of what they're looking at. That is kind of first and foremost. Let's get kind of the feel from the media companies and in terms of what we can expect from the Pac-12 side. Obviously, the Big 12 is coming to market a little bit later, but they could trigger that if they ended up expanding, yada yada. Yeah, and then I think the big kind of chess piece is out there in terms of Notre Dame. Everybody wants to know, well, what's going to happen with the Irish? They're going to sit pat. They certainly have the luxury of time and the ability to just kind of stick it out and go independent. But I think there is some increasing pressure. I think internally in terms of that athletic department, looking at things a little bit more closely about maybe casting off that independence. I don't think there's a rush to make that decision, certainly, but I think there's a little bit more openness. I think coming out of South Bend, it's funny because a lot of ADs are actually there in South Bend as part of a Lead One conference this week. So there's a big focus on Notre Dame in terms of the industry, and the industry is actually there right now. So there is that kind of aspect of things, and I think third, what is the college football playoff going to look like? I think that is kind of sitting in the background.
It's the biggest thing.
And obviously, those media companies are understanding that there's going to be some sort of expansion. I don't think anybody thinks we're going to be sticking at 4. We could have different iterations. We could go to 6. We could go to 8. We could go to 12. I think there is certainly a blank slate in terms of what the ultimate result is going to be. But there's going to be a new postseason structure. There's going to be a new postseason TV deal that is coming. So how that all shapes up, what kind of auto bids might be out there, what kind of conference access is going to be a part of things. That's all going to get taken care of really over the next probably 8 to 12 months. And look, that is a huge factor in terms of whether the Pac-10, as it's currently constructed, could move forward as an entity and say, we could be comfortable. Yeah, we're not going to get maybe close to what the Big Ten and the SEC are getting in terms of media rights, but we would still have playoff access, and we would still be fine in terms of being together as a league, and with a lot of teams and universities that have been together for decades, at this point. So I think there's kind of those 3 tracks in terms of TV negotiations going on already with not only the Big Ten, but the Pac-12. You have this college football playoff sitting kind of behind everything. And then what's happening with Notre Dame. So I think that's slowed the process down. And frankly, everybody's still digesting this massive move. Like it's USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. It just caught everybody by surprise. So now you kind of having to re-examine everything as well.
Yeah. One thing that you don't need time to re-examine to determine whether it really makes sense is buying stuff from homefieldapparel.com, the flagship sponsor of this podcast, this program, a great friend, the D1 Ticker Extended Universe. Our friends at Home Field Apparel have just released their Oklahoma collection, which has excellent shirts for softball and basketball. It fits what has been my core principle in deciding whether a vintage t-shirt collection is worth spending money on. And that is, are there animals playing sports? Brother, for Oklahoma, we got some animals playing sports. We are going to have the Kansas State collection drop this week. I think there's a pretty good chance there's going to be some animals playing sports in that one. There's going to be at least one very big national brand that will drop at the end of this big new season too. Can't tell you exactly which one it is yet, but I don't know if there's going to be any animals playing sports in that one. But you should buy that one, and you should buy the ones that are coming out here this week as well. It's the most comfortable apparel. It's the most unique apparel. It's going to be a great conversation piece whenever you go to the bar or a party. And when you buy some stuff on Home Field, use our promo code Extra Points to save 15% off that order. That saves you money. That gives us money, which we then use to buy stuff at Home Field, which is the foundation of how the economy works. I think I'll also just very quickly add, of course, if you are an athletic director, I had 2 people reach out to me over the last week and a half asking to be put in touch with Home Field. Matt at extrapointsmb.com. I'm happy to make that introduction. I feel like there was something else Home Field adjacent that I wanted to mention here, and it just flew out of my head. I was looking at the Oklahoma designs, and clearly that ruined whatever sense of serious professional segue that I had here, because it's got animals playing sports. Oh, I that's it. I can't mention this too, but I was doing a bunch of foil work for to track down some EA Sports college football stuff that I'm going to be updating next week, and I found not 1 but 2 schools that will also be adding campaigns with Home Field Apparel. They're both in the G5. They're both coming this football season. I do not believe I am authorized to tell you what they are right now, but it was pretty funny. So sorry about that, Connor.
No worries. It's all good as long as we're getting more schools signed up for Home Field. I mean, it was great this past collection in terms of Oklahoma. My sister went to OU, so it's like I at least have some stuff in my back pocket for birthdays and Christmas and all that. That was certainly all taken care of, thanks to our friends at Home Field. But some great designs on the way, as you mentioned. Not only just the big schools like Kansas State coming up, but I think throughout the year, it's always a constant refresh too. Even some of the past schools always get some new designs, and so it's you got to constantly kind of get on there, check it around, and make sure you use that promo code Extra Points.
There is one last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit here before we wrapped up. I have been working on a bunch of different stories right now, trying to better understand some of the travel and logistical considerations that come with expanding a conference all the way across the dang country. I want to really get in the weeds to understand what it means to fly people across the country, not just football players, but everybody. I want to understand what that means for missing class. I want to understand what that means for driving the equipment truck. I want to understand all of those components. And so I reached out actually to UCLA among a bunch of other schools and a bunch of other people here over the last 10 days. And one of those stories will publish on Extra Points Wednesday morning. It's a paywalled one, which you have to do because we got to eat around here. But that was digging into California's state travel ban. The California state government, as a way to demonstrate that they're opposed to legislation that's been passed across the country that they perceive as anti-LGBTQ community or anti-trans community. So like, hey, can't use California state resources to travel to Texas or Montana or Idaho, or now 3 different teams in the Big Ten footprint, Iowa, Indiana, and Ohio. And the way things are going here, probably Nebraska, I would imagine, in the near future too, given how ruby red that state is. So I wanted to know, like, what does that mean for joining a conference that is now in those states? I got into the weeds about there, but UCLA shared a little bit of other information here with me that I'm happy to pass along here a little bit. As far as travel is concerned, UCLA spokesperson said, like, I want to get the exact quote here. We are mindful that a mostly East Coast conference schedule would impact our student athletes in other ways, such as travel time. But we intend to reduce any such burdens with creative scheduling and using increased athletic resources to provide faster and more efficient transportation options. We also anticipate our road game times to be more friendly times for our West Coast family and fans, ensuring more visibility for our storied programs. So I think there's a little bit of news in that. I don't think anybody from either school or for the Big Ten has said anything definitive about start times. This would seem to make you think that they're not going to be playing. I mean, like, if it's going to be, family friendly for West Coast, that would make me think you're not playing UCLA and USC road games at noon Eastern. But that's also part of the reason you do this, right? I mean, that makes it easier for jet lag, and you play those games a little bit later on in the day. That helps USC and UCLA's television exposure in some way. But if it's prime time on the East, it's the same thing as playing at 3:30 in the West, which is what you've been doing anyway. Balancing those demands between what Fox wants, what Maryland wants, because I'm sure Maryland would love to host USC at noon and beat them up when they're all jet lagged to hell, and what now UCLA is very clearly signaling they want. That's going to be challenging. I would love to know what kind of guarantees the Big Ten had to make in order to make this happen, given what I'm sure will be other constituent groups pushing for.
Well, I think that was part of the planning on behalf of USC and UCLA's, move to join the conference. But honestly, this has kind of come together so quickly. And as part of the media rights negotiations, you really don't know in terms of the actual TV packages what might be divvied up, not just in football, but men's basketball, women's basketball, Olympic sports that are going to be televised as well. There's a lot of TV windows that are available for a lot of this, and I think exposure. You mentioned that UCLA line there. I think they're going to be playing a little bit more of those 3:30 Eastern games. Which is not really a big Pac-12 window right now. Like you'll get an occasional game like that, or at Fox on the 4 p.m. one, 4 p.m. Eastern. But the Pac-12 teams just do not get a ton of those. That's been a point of contention for a lot of folks around the conference footprint in terms of they really have not gotten that exposure. That is a big TV window. I would imagine, given if CBS ends up, or CBS or NBC end up getting a 3:30 slot to the Big Ten, that would be another opportunity to showcase those games of USC and UCLA in windows. They really have not kind of gotten that East Coast exposure, and you got to understand on the flip side as well. There's only 2 of these schools, like the amount of travel, it's only those 2 schools, but it does impact the rest of the league. You're talking about Penn State going west. You're talking about Maryland going west. It's not just USC and UCLA hopping on a plane. You got to worry about people going east and then kind of coming back and maybe taking a lot of red eyes. And so This is going to be a conference-wide issue. I think they are going to study it a little bit more over the coming months and years before they ultimately have to plug in that conference schedule. But at the end of the day, I think this is not necessarily a huge issue for football because you can go in on Thursday, kind of get used to things a little bit. That's generally how teams are going to do that now anyway. If it's a non-conference game on the East Coast, you'll go in a little bit early compared to your normal Friday routine and kind of get used to things that way. I doubt they're going to be playing a whole lot of those big noon games. We've already heard the old body clock issue, when Stanford played Northwestern back in the day.
Yeah, I have learned that's not a meme, and I definitely got some jokes off about the whole body clock thing. And then, it was last week when we at Extra Points, we published a story that was, with an academic report out of Bowling Green and a couple of other colleges where they interviewed athletes and actually looked at that literature. And then I felt kind of bad because they're like, no, actually, athletes definitely believe that this matters. And that if you're on a plane for 4 hours, your legs get heavy. But that literally, like, medical science says, like, being jet lagged going west to east, you need like a whole day to acclimate for every hour. And even coming in on Thursday isn't totally enough. And that's a big shock. It wasn't surprising that Stanford lost to a pretty lousy Northwestern team in that window. And that is, like, just from a performance issue, setting aside academics for a second, or personal relationships, or anything about people's individual identities, just in terms of producing the best possible athletic product. I don't know how to completely resolve that. It seems like that is going to be a pretty big East Coast advantage for those programs when they get the LA schools.
Well, it's not just football. Like I think that is where the crux of the matter is. It is basketball, where you might be playing a Wednesday game and then you end up on a Saturday or Sunday. So are you spending like basically an entire week in LA if you're Maryland going west? Like there's that kind of aspect. Are you going to have to try to maybe squeeze in an extra game if you're USC going east? You play maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Saturday or something like that. That's a lot of basketball or volleyball or something like that. Can they do things to kind of make that easier, where you're staying out like the NFL? You'll see some West Coast NFL teams. A lot of times they'll just stay on the East Coast if they end up having back-to-back games. They'll make an entire week of it. So that could be a possibility as well.
Yeah, I have been told that isn't something that typically happens for schools on the mainland, whether that's for NCAA reasons, academic reasons, or financial reasons. That could be one thing. The thing that I think we talked about this before, and I'm still working through it because I've talked to a couple of West Coast schools, and I'm hoping to get a few more so I can write the full story. I'm trying to better understand about what the creative travel looks like, right? We've talked about, this probably means chartering, which definitely does save you. And you look at my mentions over the last day since I shared this quote, this idea of you can't make the country smaller and you can't move some of these campuses. And obviously we're not everyone's making their jokes off right now about teleporting, which, I mean, look, UCLA is a great school, so maybe, but like probably not. I would really love to hear Kevin Warren or Martin Jarmond or even more of these Dobos, because the people at the Big Ten schools, and certainly in Los Angeles, they're shutting up about this right now, to talk about getting really in the weeds about what that looks like. For football, I don't really care that much. And it's not, I mean, obviously that's important, but we're looking at 5 road games a year. Maybe each LA school might actually only go to the Eastern time zone like once a season. Most of these games are in Central, which is still a big deal, not quite as big of a deal. I am way more concerned about this for basketball and baseball and soccer and some of these other sports. And this is not me being overly critical. Like, I know what this looks like, and we can all make the assumptions about what it typically looks like, but I want to keep an open mind about maybe there are solutions here that I'm unaware of because I've never been a Dobo. A Dobo is a director of operations, like the kind of people that book all this travel and manage all this stuff before. So I'm still working on it. If you know the answer, Matt at extrapointsmb.com. I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, even as somebody who's lived in Los Angeles for almost 2 decades, I mean, going east it's a tough trip. That LA to New York flight, that's a long flight. Like I can't even imagine just doing that on a more regular basis. Just the toll it takes. And I was only doing it maybe like once a month. Like to do it a couple times a month. It's like that's tough, especially if you're like leaving after a game. If you end up playing a Big Ten team and that's a 7 p.m. Eastern kickoff, and it is tough. And I mean, ask any of these programs. UCLA has a great sports science. Especially on the football side, like that has been a big thing about Chip Kelly. What is key to that? Sleep. And so whether that
eating right.
And eating right and eating well, if you would,
not eating cheaply, yeah.
No, but I mean, like it's a huge deal, and there are going to be performance impacts from the Olympic sports. Let's face it, that is a big deal for both USC and UCLA because they have premium softball programs, premium soccer programs, premium baseball programs. This is a big deal for them because those are national title contenders in a lot of those Olympic sports. And USC, UCLA, they don't want to see the performance suffer just from conference play because that can end up costing you a tournament experience. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Big Ten manages. From what I've been told, that will be addressed a little bit, or at least we might get some additional information. I'm sure Kevin Warren will at least be asked about it in terms of Big Ten Media Days coming up around the corner. So
yeah,
I'm sure
be there. I'll ask him if I got a lot of things I want to ask Kevin.
Yeah, Warren. I was going to say you can get in line because the amount of conversations that Kevin Warren's going to have in Indianapolis there for Media Days. I mean, even Big 12 Media Days. I mean, there's no shortage of talking points at any of these Media Days. It is talking season. Plenty to talk about right now with college football media days upon us.
Man, and you know what? I don't know about you, Bryan. I have done very little reading over the past 3 months about actual football. I was joking about this with one of my reporter buddies earlier today, about actual talking ball stuff. And I'm like, I don't know anything about Wake Forest. I don't know anything about Kansas State. I don't know what's being returned in some of these places. Like I know Alabama is going to be really good. I know Ohio State's going to be really good. Don't know if they can stop anybody, but I know they're going to score a gajillion points. And I think Georgia will probably not be quite as good. But in terms of like my level of football knowledge compared to where it normally is in mid-July is way worse this year. And part of that is just because of my job has evolved and Extra Points has evolved, but there's just been so much energy on this other stuff. And typically the media day season is kind of to talk through that. So let me kind of end up on this actually to kind of let you, the listener, know what to expect for the next couple of weeks. Throughout July, we have a couple of episodes with some guests. We have some who have written exciting books that they want to talk about, who are working on exciting projects within college athletics that they want to talk about. Bryan and I are also doing a little bit of travel in July, but you will definitely have at least one episode, if not more, a week throughout July. In August, we want right in the beginning of August, we want to replicate something that we did last year, where these actually performed pretty well, and bring in some experts to help preview some of these conferences. Where they're not going to be here to tell you who's going to finish fourth in the Big 12. These are typically to talk about major storylines, talk about major administrators to watch, what's going on with presidents and ADs, coaching changes, big existential program questions. But there's going to be several of those podcasts for the major conferences, FCS. If we can find a good Division II or Division III expert, I'll be happy to bring on board there too. So you may see a more podcasts than you're used to in the beginning of August as we shift from just pure administrator talk into a little bit of talking ball and getting ready for the season. So you'll have lots to look forward to for your long drives, your vacations, and everything here at the end of July and the beginning of August. In the meantime, Bryan has produced a gajillion videos on Collegiate Sports Connect. I'm not just saying this to be a company man. There's great information there. A ton of administrator, coach, and industry interviews from NACDA, including Bryan had a really super fascinating one about some of the early origins about the Longhorn Network that you can find there. We've got some stuff with the head of the CLC. If you're a video game aficionado, Collegiate Sports Connect is completely free. If you're in the industry, it's a no-brainer. You got to sign up. If you're not in the industry, but you're interested in this stuff, which I know you are because you spent 40 minutes listening to us, you should still set up an account. You can find all those videos there. And you can, of course, also find what we're doing on Extra Points at extrapointsmb.com. Did I get everything?
I think so. If you haven't signed up for the D1 ticker as well, that's another place to go for the latest in terms of the headlines coming fast and furious, not only during talking season here with all those media days, but conference realignment, media days, all, media deals, the whole wide gamut. I mean, that'll all be covered in the D1 ticker. And you're right, Collegiate Sports Connect. If you're somebody young trying to break into the industry, or you want a job in college athletics, go ahead and sign up, because ADs are out there. They're looking. They're signing up people whose profiles they see on Collegiate Sports Connect. Just so somebody got hired off of there the other day. So like it is a big it is a big thing, not only to have your profile on there so you can see some of the great content that we're producing, but also if you want to break into the industry, if you want to get yourself hired by some of these athletic departments that are looking for a lot of people right now. I think that is something a lot of people are dealing with just in terms of the industry itself. There's a lot of open jobs right now, and they want great candidates. And whether you're inside college athletics or not, if you're looking for something a little bit different, there's a little bit probably a gig for everybody. And so Collegiate Sports Connect is a great way to kind of get your foot in the door for sure. And in addition to all that great content that you mentioned, I mean, there are some interviews still coming out from our conversations at NACDA, but we on a daily basis, we're still talking with industry leaders. We're talking about travel at UCLA. We're talking about the latest in terms of realignment. We're talking about NFTs, and we're just trying to book a couple people in regard to like marketing opportunities. So a whole lot on there, and I think the easiest way to not only sign up for that, but sign up for D1 Ticker and make sure you're following along.
To everyone, thank you, especially junior level positions. This is a LinkedIn for the college sports industry. If you are looking to break into this world or shift into it, you're going to find a ton of jobs on there. In the meantime, thanks for listening, everybody. We've got some editing to do. Lord knows we got a bunch more phone calls to make here over the next 48 hours to track down some more of this news. Thanks for listening, everyone. Here's hoping for another 100. We'll catch up with y'all later.